Good morning and welcome to the Hibs Observer Friday morning briefing. I'm Patrick McPartlin, the editor of the Hibs Observer, and delighted to say today that I've been joined by Matty Fairnie of the Longbangers podcast. Matty, how are you?
I'm very good, Patrick. Yeah, thanks very much for asking me on this morning.
Yeah, good to have you on. As I'm sure you'll know if you've been following our website from the start, Matty does a kind of weekly column, which is, I suppose, a view from the terrace, the kind of fans' view of everything that's been going on at the club this season. So he's had plenty to write about. I think pretty much since the curtain rose at the start of the season. So I think plenty to discuss on today's call. Obviously, a big game tomorrow against Motherwell at Fir Park. And I suppose just looking at Nick Montgomery's time in charge so far, 33 games at the helm, that'll become 34 tomorrow. And I think we could just look back at his time in charge of the club today and what comes next. So before we get going, just have to put a small word out there for our sponsors. You know the drill by now, folks. We're thrilled to have Weissman, a global leader in the boiler industry, known for their top-notch German engineering, as our podcast sponsors. They've teamed up with Scotland's very own awards-winning installation team, MPH Boilers, making this a perfect match right here in Scotland. Weissman's boilers are engineered to deliver not just warmth, but unparalleled efficiency and reliability. This is cutting-edge technology designed to save you on energy bills and reduce emissions. With MPH Boilers, you're getting service from the best in the business. It's a local team committed to excellence and customer satisfaction. As part of this partnership, when you choose a Weissman boiler installed by MPH Boilers, you'll also get a free internet controller, making it a scoosh to manage your heating anytime, anywhere. And they're offering the first year service free, all about giving you peace of mind and making sure you're looked after. So if your boiler is showing its age or you're considering an upgrade, this is your chance to get world-class engineering with local expert service. Weissman and MPH Boilers, a match made in Scotland. Be sure to check them out and do take the first step towards a warmer, more efficient home. On to the good stuff now. Matty, you've obviously talked a lot about Hibs this season. You've talked a lot about Nick Montgomery. You've talked about the style of play and your fan views. What's your kind of overall kind of take on the season so far?
It's a good question, Patrick. I think it's been like I get described as a season of false dawns, where we've had moments where we've looked like, right, we're there, we're a good team, we're going to kick on, and then just something sort of borderline catastrophic happens, like the result on Saturday, or a VAR decision, or something that just like it's been probably the unluckiest season I can remember. Like if I was Nick Montgomery, I would be cursing my luck because he's had key players out injured. The VAR decisions have been incredible, really. This season, he's had games like Saturday where we've been well on top. Opposition gets two shots on target, 2 goals, but at the same time, it's been really disappointing at times as well. So for all the false dawns, there's been lots of times where actually we've looked like the team that's bang mid-table. That's not as good as the teams that are round about us. I don't know. Frustrating is probably the best word to sum it up. It just has been a really, really frustrating season.
I suppose it's difficult to kind of answer this, perhaps, because I mean Montgomery wasn't really a known figure in Scottish football before he got the job. But were you sort of expecting perhaps a bit more from him, just given what he managed to achieve with Central Coast Mariners on a sort of shoestring budget, and with sort of bringing young players through? Did this sort of seem like a match made in heaven, if you like, when he got the Hibs job?
Yeah, absolutely. I was all on board with him on a hype train when he came on. So when he was first rumoured, I went and had a look at his background, watched some videos on YouTube, had a look at Central Coast, see what he'd achieved. And on paper, it was a terrific appointment. I think you're looking at a manager on the up. Hibs, I believe, headhunted him rather than him applying for the role. So you're looking at it, he's coming in early in the season, so plenty of time to make a difference. I don't think anybody 4 games into the season was picking, can you scrape into top 6 as a target or salvage the season? 4 games in, you should be looking to make a difference. And I think one of the things that stood out from his time at Central Coast was that he was able to take a team of unspectacular players and make them a spectacular team. and a successful team. And I think when he first came in, you saw things like the huddle, in the warm up. These things kind of were wee pointers to say, here's how he's driving that team building, and you expect to see that correlate into good results on the pitch and good performances. And I think it's just fallen short of that, like well short of it. I don't think, like I said, I don't think the expectation was ever, can we just make top six? I don't know, because we can still achieve fourth. Like, it's the mental thing about this season is it's not impossible. It's improbable, but not impossible that we could still achieve the season target. But I don't think that anybody saw the season going like this.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things it's tough for us to kind of write about is in terms of looking at the team and has progress been made. Obviously, there's been quite a few ins and outs in January, and I think you said this in your piece as well. Excuse me, or you referenced it at least. So there hasn't really been a statement win. There's been nothing to sort of suggest that a corner has been turned. But would you say that progress has been made? Do you feel could you see like a change in the way the team's playing from pre Montgomery?
So there's definitely a change in style. So I can see what the team's trying to do. We have this sort of possession-based play out from the back, try to draw the opponent out, and find holes in the defence that way. How effective that has been, I think, is up for debate. I think we've seen too many games where, like, you've got 45 minutes against against St Johnstone on Saturday, where the goalkeeper doesn't have a meaningful save to make. You could take that to Ross County up in Dingwall, where the first half the goalkeeper could have just sat in the stand. So we have this style of play there's when it works, it looks brilliant, and we have had, to be fair to Monty, we have had spells in games where we've looked really good, and I've really enjoyed it. But the counter is that there's other times where it's awful. It's just nothing happens, and I don't know if it's a style of play that I would persevere with, and I don't know if it's just a case of stick with the style of play and bring in better players, because we did that in January and we had a sort of short-term lift, but we seem to have regressed since then as well. And I think that's probably my biggest concern about Montgomery so far, is we had an initial boost when he came in. We looked better. We all talked about how the team was more coherent, the style of play was coming through, and then we regressed as the months went on. And there's various reasons for that, like players wearing international duties and injuries and suspensions and so on. But we went backwards, and we kind of were desperate to get to the January window for fairly major surgery on the team. We got an initial lift there, so post the St Mirren debacle in January, we started to look good. But I think we've gone backwards again. So to answer your question about progress, I think it's really difficult to say hand on heart that there's tangible progress being made. I think there are things you could point to that are better, but a lot of things that just haven't really, the dial's not moved on them at all.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think it's been, as you say, it's been frustrating because you can see elements of progress for sort of short periods of time, and then it does seem to kind of, as a case of kind of one step forward, two steps back. Obviously, having been to just about every game, there's been periods where you think, a corner has been turned, the penny has dropped. It's, the team's in a good place now. But then, the next game there's a performance like Saturday against St Johnstone, or the first half against Ross County, and I think that's it's frustrating because there's not really any clear indication as to why that's happening. I mean, we've seen, the number of managers Hibs have had in the past sort of 3 or 4 years. You've got a team, you've got a squad there that's sort of made up of players that different managers have brought in. There's obviously going to be perhaps a little bit of, toing and froing in terms of trying to get a squad that fits the current manager style of play. Yeah. But I just think maybe from our point of view, certainly when, Liam and myself have been talking about this when we were at the games, it feels like the good bits aren't being built on. And it's very difficult to see, or to understand rather, why that's not the case, why something good happens and then it's not built on, like the performance against Livingston, that 3-0 game. Obviously blew them away in the first sort of half hour, but then it was almost like the brakes were put on. And you think that's really the sort of game like that. I mean, I'm not even sure if it had been sort of 5 or 6-0, whether you could really call that a statement win, playing against the sort of league's bottom club. But that was really a game where I thought, this is a chance for Hibs to kind of kick on, to score 4 or 5, and to use it as a platform for moving forward. But they didn't do that, and I don't know whether that's down to Montgomery's interpretation of the league, or how he sort of approaches different games, different teams and how they're going to play against Hibs. But I mean, it does seem a little bit like, I don't know. In the beginning, I think it was good that there was this sort of identity. There was a style of play that you wanted to bring in. I personally feel that kind of changed after the Rangers game in October, the 4-0 game, almost as if it kind of spooked them. Did that sort of like tie in with what you saw?
I think so. We were certainly less positive after that game. I think it showed the deficiencies in the system that he was trying to play with the players that he had at the time. But I don't think it was a really significant change in style or shape. It was more how it was applied, because he kind of stuck with this much maligned 4-4-2, at least the starting formation, for a long time, up until really Marcondes was signed, and we had that sort of number 10 player that could sort of link the attack in the midfield, and we looked better at that point. I totally agree with your point that we have had these moments where you look like we're on the cusp of building a little bit of momentum, and then something has happened to stop it. I don't think the team's particularly good at dealing with adversity. I think like some of the decisions that have gone against us, and what you would really want to see is a team use that to fire them up and push them on. And what we tend to do is go into our shell. So whether it's conceding a goal, as we did on Saturday. So once we had a good reaction to conceding the first goal, we kind of came to life a bit, got the equaliser, but we never looked like scoring after Livingston got after St Johnstone got their second goal. And it's these wee moments of adversity in games that I think the team really struggles with, and I don't know whether that's is that the character or personality of the team, these kind of words that get bandied about football teams. It definitely seems to be missing with us, that something goes wrong and we can just go, oh well, that's happened again, and hopefully next week will be better.
I think we said the same things after the St Johnstone game, just about was it mentality, was it something else that was almost kind of cursing the club. When you consider the number of games, I don't have the exact number to hand, I don't want to press anyone any further, but I think there was the number of games where Hibs have been in a winning position and then have dropped points or not taken full points, whether that's the Ross County away with that the late equaliser, St Mirren away. There's been too many to mention, and I think from our point of view that would suggest that it is down to it's a mentality or it's a psychological thing, or just not being able to kind of stay focused for the full amount of time. And as you rightly say, when they are faced with adversity, when they do go a goal down, quite often don't look like pulling anything out of it. And I think the Rangers game at Ibrox was probably a good example that they score and then immediately can concede, and you just think all the good work that's been done in terms of management to find an equaliser just completely evaporates in a matter of seconds sometimes. And I think this is the sort of league where other teams will punish you when you make mistakes like that, when you give them a chance. And we don't need to pick through what we've seen from Hibs this season, but there has been times that I think the defending has been questionable. It's been really poor. It's obviously not been helped by not being able to have, I think, a kind of settled defence. I think it was counting up that there's been, I think, 6 starting right backs and 9 players used at right back altogether. There's been 6 central defensive combinations. And, in some ways you can sort of say, well, it's maybe a little bit concerning if this, after 30 plus games, the manager's still kind of tinkering with what he feels is his best formation. And, there are caveats. You talk about injuries, talk about suspensions, international duty, etc. But from the little we've seen since January, the signings who've come in, does that sort of fill you with, I suppose, confidence or optimism for the summer transfer window, that if Montgomery is given, if he is sort of backed by the boards and the club, given the chance to bring in sort of, his own players with obviously the backing from Bill Foley's investment, is that, is there sort of like the brighter times ahead, or is there more of a concern because, with the players who were brought in January, the sort of results and performances should have been better?
Probably a little bit of both, to be honest with you. So I really like the signings that we made in January. I think we've been unlucky that Amos hasn't featured as much due to injury. Mariah Welsh, I think, is a terrific player. Triantis doesn't look great as a defender. looks much more assured in the midfield. I have a little question mark about why Chantis would be playing in midfield ahead of Mariah Welsh when we've signed Mariah Welsh on like a permanent deal rather than a loan. I think if we can find players like Merlida and Marcondes and bringing up Easter Road, I think it can only be a good thing. But I do worry that we haven't seen the uplifting results that we should have done. So if you take Saturday, for example, I mean, I would guess that Merlida and Marcondes, I think if you put their weekly wage together, you're probably not far off St Johnson's starting 11's weekly wage. And it didn't make too much of a difference. We're not, despite the signings that we've made, we've only scored 3 goals or more than 2 goals once in the league this season, which was against Livingston, who were, the worst team in the league, badly depleted through illness in the week running up to the game. So we have clear issues despite the signings, and we have made good signings. And I think this is the worry for me is if you go position to position, we've got good players in most positions, right? I think there's some question marks about the centre half still don't look particularly competent all the time, but both fullbacks are good. Like Chris Cadden and Lewis Miller can do a good job. Jordan Abita's good. The midfield looks good most of the time. And at the top end of the pitch, we should be scoring much more than we do. But it's just not clicking. So in the summer, if we bring in a similar standard of player, I'm not sure where the evidence is to suggest that it's going to be a lot better. And I think that's where I'm struggling with Montgomery just now is I'm desperate for him to do well. I think I've been quite negative about him when I've been writing and talking about him on the podcast. But desperately want him to do well. Like I said earlier on, I was all in on bringing him to the club. Really, really backed him. I think he's a good guy, like a good person. I think his values are in the right place for a club like Hibs. But you need some evidence, something tangible to say this is going to work. And at the moment, that's the bit that I'm just struggling to see. And it's sort of like this, you cling on to hope that it's going to work out in the summer. Like we hope if he gets a bit more money and a bit, they have the build an indoor pitch out at East Mains, and we've got extra revenue coming in that it'll click. But it's only hope at the moment. I don't have anything to base that on.
So if I can take you back to this time, maybe last year, when I think Hibs, obviously slightly later on in the season, Hibs had made the top 6, and ended up taking it to the final day in terms of trying to get that 4th spot. How have your feelings changed since then? Because obviously it was a kind of similar situation where there'd been some signings made in January who had improved the team, and it was maybe a case of I would argue probably based on what we saw from Hibs in the second half of last season, the majority of fans would have been going into last summer thinking, if we get the right players in, then we could really make a good go of it, for this season. And obviously that didn't transpire. So how are you feeling now compared to sort of last year around the same time?
I think there's some really clear parallels to be drawn against last season at this time, because if you remember, we went to Perth the last day pre-split, needing to win. So unless results went our way, we had to win, and we didn't win. It was like a typical performance. Again, a refereeing decision influencing the game. Jimmy Jago gets sent off, but we didn't do our part. But sort of got through into the top 6 by virtue of results going our way elsewhere. The exact same situation on Saturday, where we need to win and hope Dundee don't pick up a win in their last 2 games to get top 6. It tells you how I feel. I wonder what the club have learned about it, because obviously we had a strong finish to the season last season. Johnson did well, picked up win against Celtic. Should really have won the last game of the season at Tynecastle, and ultimately sort of fell a wee bit short, but did well enough to kind of get the summer and enough credit in the bank to start the next season. Obviously, this season started and it was a bit of a disaster. We changed manager, and then Montgomery comes in, and he doesn't have the pre-season to work with the players. He doesn't have any of his signings in because the transfer window's been and gone. And we then have a discussion when things aren't working about how he needs another window or he needs more time. We're pretty much in the exact same situation, and I think it's a it's a tricky one in terms of how I feel about it. I really, I know, sitting on the fence again, but I really don't know, because I think if I was Ben Kensel and Ian Gordon and asking what lessons did we learn for last season, the lesson I would have learned would have been we probably shouldn't have started the season with Lee Johnson. And then if you apply that to now and you say, well, how do you learn for that lesson? And as you make a change to the manager, but at the same time, I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do. It totally blows my mind, Patrick. I really struggle to articulate or to land on what should happen next, like and how I feel about it, because there's so many red flags with it. But at the same time, deep down, I think the club needs stability, and we've churned managers at a ridiculous rate. And all that happens if we start a game with somebody else is you just rewind. And if you look at the trend with Hibs and managers, what tends to happen is we have a manager doesn't do well, the next guy comes in, also doesn't do well, but takes us backwards a little bit because he's had to start again. And then the next guy does it. And then we kind of get a critical point where something happens. Like last time it was relegation. Hopefully it doesn't happen this time. But that cycle just repeats. And then we have a rebuild and we do well for a couple of years until somebody doesn't get it right and it starts to fall away again. And we're in the middle of that cycle again at the moment. So I can see the logic in saying, do you know what? Just stand firm, keep the manager, let him build, give him time. But it's a hard sell to a lot of fans. And if you saw like the reaction at full time, which you would have done, because I think you'll have been just like along for me in the West Stand at full time, there was folk hanging back, not just to kind of boo the players, but to kind of target the manager. And it's a long way back for a manager when the support's at that stage.
It is, and I think the thing that maybe I noticed from that was that I think there has been a certain level of apathy about Hibs this year, just from the fan base. The thing that sort of struck me the most was when they were 3-0 up against Livingston after 25 minutes, and it was just, the atmosphere was just kind of a bit dead.
It was really dead.
And I think I said that to Liam at the time, that I found it really strange that, it was really, I think, the first kind of clear evidence we'd seen of Hibs playing the way that Montgomery's been saying he wants them to play. It looked like every time they attacked, they were going to score, which hasn't happened for a long time at Easter Road. And despite that, the atmosphere was really flat. It was, it just felt really strange. And I think to go from that apathy, and I think I can understand why there's that sort of level of apathy, because, you look at, as you sort of say, there's been so many managers coming and going in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I think when you've got big characters. I mean, Johnson, obviously, not everybody's cup of tea. I think would be the nicest way of saying that. But, did seem to go from one extreme to the other. If it was a good win, then he was very, very kind of enthusiastic and, talking up the players. If it was a bad defeat, then he was going in the opposite direction. With Montgomery, it's very much kind of, I've said this before, I think, Hibs could win 7-0 or lose 7-0, and I think, broadly speaking, his reaction would be the same. And I think that I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, especially for the players, perhaps, to kind of have this sort of level of consistency from the manager. But I don't think the fans have reacted particularly well to that. I think my experience from speaking to various fans, including yourself, is that when it's not when it's not been a great performance, when it's been a defeat, there hasn't really been the kind of reaction that I think a lot of fans expect, and that's not necessarily a criticism of Nick Montgomery. He is who he is. And I'm reminded of when Paul Heckingbottom was in charge, and he made that kind of throwaway comment about subbing Scott Allen. And I do think there's this sort of Yorkshire wit, this sort of really dry sense of humour that doesn't necessarily translate very well. Certainly not in the football management sphere, but maybe just sort of in general. And I think obviously there's not been too much to kind of laugh and joke about Hibs this season, but I do wonder whether part of it is just this sort of very, I don't know, it just seems very kind of on the straight and narrow at all times. There's no kind of histrionics in defeat. There's no kind of hero worshipping when there's a victory, and I think that's sort of led to this sort of ambivalence almost from the fans, that you've got supporters saying, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to go to the game, or I don't know if I can face going to another game where it's the same style of football that we've been seeing, and it's not what they want to see. It's sort of slow, ponderous, etc." But I think it's difficult because you look at Saturday's game, which we'll obviously talk about just to tie things up after this. But it's the kind of sort of season where if this was maybe last season, then because of the way the team was playing football, you'd expect fans would be turning out their numbers to try and sort of roar the team on, and it just doesn't feel like that's going to be the case this time. And I could be wrong when I see the away end at Fir Park tomorrow, but I do almost feel that there is this. It's almost kind of the fans are kind of reacting to what they're seeing on the pitch, and there's not this sort of sense of supporting the team through thick and thin. And I think it's just this, like I say, this apathy, this sort of fans are kind of tired with this constant churn. If it does go Hibs' ways tomorrow, if everything works out, then depending what happens in the top six, does that buy Montgomery more time, or does it really depend on how things go in those sort of final few games? Or as well, if it is the bottom six, what would you do then?
A good question. So I think top six, he probably needs one of those statement wins that we were talking about. If he beat Hearts at Easter Road, for example, like a derby win buys a huge amount of credit for a manager. And I think Montgomery really suffers for not having had one of those, not just the derby win, but the best we've done against the Old Firm is we've managed to draw with Celtic.
Uh-huh.
We've not really had one of those games that everybody relishes where we've gone, oh, that's great, and we've got the win. I suppose the last one that we really kind of had was Luzerne under Lee Johnson. That's still probably the highlight of the season. I think if he doesn't do that, if we sort of limp over the line to top six and we limp through the last 5 fixtures, I think it's going to be a hard sell for fans to get on board with it for next season, unless the club open a checkbook. And I don't think they will. I don't think like the money that Foley's putting forward is not going to be life changing for Hibs in the short term at all. Like I don't think we're going to be seeing Romanov style World Cup stars arrive at Easter Road in the summer. So even then, to sort of temper expectations, and I would expect Hearts to spend more than Hibs because of the the amount of money that goes into them. So like. And Hibs are caught between a rock and a hard place, but with it, even getting bottom six, which I think under normal circumstances should be sort of the cut-off point for a manager, where you say, right, that is unacceptable at Hibs. Do you bite the bullet and give them the more time anyway, based on what we were saying earlier about you need some stability and you need to build? And I think also, like, if they do decide to make a change, Ian Gordon and Kit Gordon as the club's owners have to be looking at who's making the selections. Brian McDermott, Ben Kensell, they come into the spotlight because that would be our second bottom six finish in 3 seasons under Kensell. Again, it's pretty major underperformance. If that was to happen, obviously, 2 top six finishes out of 3 is good going. If things go away on Saturday. But I think the worst case for Hibs is definitely that we don't make top six, because there's a situation that has to be dealt with then, one way or another. Decisions have to be made, and I don't think it'll be enough for Hibs to do nothing. They can't just go and, whether it's say nothing, so sticking with Montgomery is doing something, so we can say this is what we're doing. But I think Hibs have to do similar to what Kensell did when Brian McDermott came in, which, if you remember, was a period where Lee Johnson was under a lot of pressure, and effectively bringing Brian McDermott and allowed Kensell to say to the Hibs fans, we recognise things aren't great, we're sticking with the manager, and this is what we're doing to support him. We don't have a director of football to bring in this time, so you're almost needing Ben Kensell to come out and say, we're sticking with the manager anyway, and this is why, and given some of these tangible reasons that I was talking about earlier, to get people on side with it. Because we can't do nothing. But if we don't make top six, we can't do nothing. We can't just let that pass and go into the next season without comment. People will switch off from it. So I don't know if I answered the question there, right? But bottom six, under normal circumstances, should be sackable. I don't know if I would sack Montgomery, though, on the basis of doing the right thing, giving a manager time.
Mm-hmm. I think that's where I'm at with this, is that it does almost feel like maybe it would be a little harsh to, kind of cut the corners, if you like, if it was like a poor outcome tomorrow, if it was bottom six, because it's one transfer window, and as we've said, there were some positive signs, but again, you compare it to last season, and then it's, had there been enough positive signs that you want? It is just very. It does feel like there's a lot of unknowns, and I think that extends to like the team as well. That, I mean, rarely have I gone along to cover a game this season, and thought, I know what way this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like even sort of games against Rangers and Celtic, you just think. I mean, after certainly the Celtic game where they got the goalless draw at Easter Road, which was a week after getting scudded 4-0 by Rangers at Ibrox, I don't think. It just sort of felt a little bit like, well, if they can, try and keep the scoreline down, that could be a good outcome. And then, they obviously play quite well. They get a, credible draw. Possibly could have even nicked it. A couple of chances in the second half. And then other games as well where you think, well, this is the sort of game the players should be getting up for. They should be putting in a good performance. And at the end of it, you're looking and thinking, how have they not come out of that with anything? Which was the case on Saturday. So,
yeah.
Going into tomorrow's game, I think, Hibs haven't really had the best of times against Motherwell this season. Obviously, losing at Fir Park at the start of the season under Lee Johnson, and then needing a kind of late equaliser at the start of the calendar year to get a draw at Easter Road. What are your feelings about tomorrow? And you can't sit on the fence,
So we need a performance. So obviously, we need to win, right? So I think, above anything else, if it's a scrappy, incorrect referee decision that goes in our favour, whatever it takes to win the game, we have to win, and the players have to be of that mindset. But I think we need the performance as well. I think for where we are just now, we need to turn up. It needs to look like the team know what's at stake. I think everybody knew last Saturday what was at stake, and the players didn't. That didn't show on the pitch in terms of the urgency and like the fight. It took us until we went behind before we got going. That's not going to be acceptable on Saturday. We need to be on the front foot from the off and try and get in front early in the game and then build on that lead rather than sitting on it. Motherwell are a tricky team. I think they've got good forwards. Our centre half struggled against them at Fir Park early in the season. I predicted a defeat last night. I think based on Hibs' performance in must-win games over recent times, I can see Motherwell having had the lift from beating Dundee last week. I think they'll come into this game in a better frame of mind than Hibs. They're at home, and I just think they think that they've got our number. So my prediction is probably a limp into a defeat and lots of frustrations and lots of anger for the next week until everybody gets out of their system.
Well, hopefully you're wrong on all counts.
Yeah, I hope so.
We will obviously find out tomorrow when Hibs go to Fir Park. Just got to wrap things up there because I've got a press conference to get to. Nick Montgomery and one of the players will be speaking ahead of tomorrow's must-win game for Hibs. Just like to say, Matty, thank you very much for joining me today. Been great to have you on. If you haven't already, do check out Longbangers for all your kind of slightly off-the-wall sort of Hibs supporting needs, I think it would be fair to say. Very, very big fans of what you guys are doing, and it's great for us to have someone like you doing our sort of regular fan view, and also coming on these videos. Hopefully this will be the first of a few showings on our live streams, and hopefully there'll be better things to talk about the next time you're on. But just wrap things up there. Thanks to everyone for your continued support. We still are running our £4 for 4 months offer. You'll see it in the ticker along the bottom of your screen at the moment. And do keep an eye on the website later tonight, probably around about 10:30, where you'll be able to hear from the manager and player ahead of tomorrow's game. So thanks for joining us. Thank you, Matty, and we will see you again soon.